Hello, members, and welcome. My name is Anna Spooner, and I am the Tastings and Events Coordinator at the Wine Society. Delighted to have you this evening and joined behind the scenes by my colleagues Catherine and Gil, who've got plenty on their plate tonight because there's quite a bit of engagement, interaction, and technology as our first ever blind online tasting kicks off. So you will have to bear with us. I'm hoping we're going to go off without a technical hitch, fingers crossed. As always, technically on Zoom, you're welcome to use the chat, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a moment, but you're also welcome to use the Q&A button to ask questions. We do hope we're going to have some time for questions. There's a lot to pack in, and when we were working out the blind elements and how we were going to do this event, we realised that actually, even though you talk about less at first about the wines, or you don't give as much detail on the background and the winemakers, by doing so, you end up talking about the wines more. And then we're going to go on to the winemakers and where they're from and who makes them. So there is actually a huge amount to pack in. If you do have any technical questions, please email tastings@thewinesociety.com and either Gil or Catherine will be able to help you. So a little bit about this evening. I hope that lots of you have got a pack, and apologies if you didn't manage to get one. They sold like hotcakes, which is great news. And hopefully we'll be able to repeat this event in a similar ilk, obviously not with the same wines, but do something similar again in the future. So there are 6 wines to try tonight, and we've paired them into little mini flights. So 2 wines side by side on each pair. Now, each pair has 1 wine from Europe and 1 wine from the New World. And I know I did say North versus South, but in the wise words of Mark Twain, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And it felt the right thing to do, actually, to pick a New World Northern Hemisphere wine. But I'm going to keep it a secret as to which that is, of course, until we get to it. But yes, they're going to be in pairs. The first pair is designed really to get your taste buds going. So yes, it's great if you've got one of these booklets that came with the packs. And it's fantastic if you do want to guess the grape and guess the country and region. We're going to have a poll at the end of each pair to see if you've guessed correctly. But it's not just, blind tasting is not just about guessing the grape, guessing the country. It's about learning to understand your palate. So the first pair is all about that. It's about learning to spot really key differences in wine. There's some similarities to the first pair and there's some key differences. So the first one's a bit of an experiment, and it really is going to get us taste buds tantalized. The second pair, so that'll be wines 3 and 4, and don't worry, I will guide you through them. Wines 3 and 4 are similar, and that's going to be the fun, can you guess, sort of classic blind tasting pair. Can you guess which is which? And then the last pair, the pair of reds, wine 5 and 6, those are going to be, it's a little bit more about challenging your preconceptions. So you might be able to guess which one of the wines is, or you could have a really good idea about one of the wines, but it's about thinking, hold on, I would never have tried the other wine, or I wasn't expecting that from the other wine. So hopefully each pair will have a little bit of fun. Like I said, please use the chat. If you're guessing, even better. I want to see how many of you can guess, because let's be honest, it's guesswork as much as anything. But I also would love to hear what you think of the wines. Have you changed your mind on a particular wine country or region? That sort of thing. And like I said, we are going to have some polls as well. They are anonymous, so don't worry. Hit your guesses when we flash up the polls, and we'll see how many of you are on the right track. I can warn you in advance, I categorically would not have got all of these wines. So it's way more fun knowing all the answers. But I promise you I wouldn't have got them. So in terms of preparation, ideally, if you have got 6 glasses like me, then I've poured all 6 wines. If you haven't, like I mentioned, you can pour them in pairs, but I would recommend having some water to hand to rinse out your glasses in between, especially after the first pair, actually. So let's get going. We're going to start with what we call Flight A. So that is wines 1 and 2. And if you've got those pre-poured, then fantastic. I have them here. Now, I'm going to hold them the other way around because I think my camera is reversing. Who knows? But wine one here is clearly, for me, and you can even see it on the camera, and it's not often you can do that. Wine one is clearly lighter. So the first thing when we're wine tasting is do not be remiss about the appearance of your wine. So immediately we've spotted a key difference between those two wines. Now, doesn't mean you're going to know exactly what they are, but you can start to work out maybe there might be some differences in the winemaking. Sometimes the oak or age can bring a bit of colour. Sometimes it's just the grape variety. Now, I will warn you, these two grapes are different. So this is the only pair with different grape varieties, but they're from the same family. And they are from growing regions that are incredibly similar in many, many ways. So it's a really fun pair because it's a bit of a wacky one. So we thought we'd start wacky, why not? But wine one, let's have a smell of it for those of you at home who have the wines. Wine one, for me, is lemony, but it's really sort of chalky and mineral on the nose as well. A little bit of peach. Feel free to throw in suggestions in the chat as well. Obviously, this is interactive, but I'm trying to give you a few hints and clues and tips. Wine tasting is hugely subjective, but one of the best training tips I can give you is smell and taste as much as you can and just try and remember those smells. So if you're suddenly thinking, oh, I didn't get lemon until she said lemon, that's fine because your brain just was not getting there as quickly. We've had some, glycerin, lemon, absolutely, Sandra, those sort of smells. Before you taste it, I would be inclined to tell you to give wine number 2 a smell. So let's have a quick smell of wine 2, the much richer, more golden colour. And immediately I have completely different smells. I don't know about you. The aromas for me, there is a tiny bit of lemon, but now we're talking more, I get dried mango in wine too. It's much more tropical. So that can suggest more sunshine, perhaps. Those tropical fruits tend to develop with a bit more sunshine hours. So you get I get a bit of something beeswaxy as well, Andrew, sure. Lychees, nectarines, something a bit floral. So there's a lot going on there. Let's quickly, now we've had a smell, go back to taste. So wine number 1. Have a little taste. Now, when you're tasting a wine, it's really important not just to think about the flavors that you're experiencing, but also what's the texture, what's the feeling in your mouth. So we'll have a go at wine number 1. Now, I have just tasted these, and you don't want to spend your whole session this evening watching me swirl wine around my mouth and spit. So I'll have a quick sip, but I'm keen, if you have just tasted it, please write in the notes, write in the chat what you've got. So for me, very high acid, it's really zingy. It's got that lovely chalky whetstone mineral sensation. Really nice, loads of acid on wine number 1. Very, very vibrant and zingy. The lemon now for me is pretty prevalent, but the aftertaste or the finish, much more stony and chalky. So wine number 2. And don't worry, we will slow down a bit, but I want to get you tasting and then guessing, and then we'll talk about how they're made and the winemaking. So wine number 2. That is lychees, mangoes, peaches for me. That's, or if it's lemony, it's lemon curdy. It's no longer that sort of zing, but it's still got acidity, it's still vibrant and fresh. I'm getting maybe a bit more. Yes, Andrew, I was just about to say something floral. So whether it's roses or, white roses, white flowers, maybe, see, my words are escaping me now. Chamomile tea, that kind of, that sort of floral note to it. So the main reason, though, that I wanted to do this pair first is because I wanted to talk about the other components that are not just flavour. So we've mentioned acid, but the main thing about this wine is not only are the fruits tasting sweeter, there is actually some residual sugar in it. Now, it can be quite hard to tell about residual sugar because sometimes your brain can trick you. And if the fruit is very sweet and it's that lovely mango flavor, you can just assume there's sugar. Now, there is sugar, but to put it in perspective, there's 26 grams per litre of sugar in this. And if you were having sort of a Sauternes Tokai, a sweet wine, you would expect over 300 grams a litre. You know, some Monbaziaks in the 200s, but certainly Tokai 10 times, if not more, the amount of sugar. So this wine is technically a medium sweet or medium dry. It's in the middle. It's got a little bit of sugar to it. But I can feel it in my mouth. My mouth gets a bit more coated with that sugar. You get a little bit of a glycerol sensation as well, and that can come from a bit of residual sugar. So it's quite a fun one to get your palate awake. Interestingly, I won't tell you that because I might give the grape away. No, I'll tell you that in a minute. But one of our buyers uses a wine from this part of the world that's very prolific in its flavors in between tasting red wines, because it can be great to throw your palate and throw something out there, and it's a bit like doing a warm-up. This is our warm-up before we get into the big exercises, so it should hopefully have rung some bells in your brain and got you thinking a little bit. So keep tasting them, keep trying, and I am going to pop up a poll, or there's 4 questions, I apologize, because as I mentioned, they're 2 different grape varieties. They're from the same family. That might be a huge clue, to be honest with you. And they're from 2 parts of the world that have similarly long growing seasons. So they're cool places, cooler climates, but with really long sunshine hours. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a clue. And Gil, if you're happy to launch the first poll, we will try wines. So wines 1 and 2, you can see here, you get a single choice. Wine 1, guess the grape. I have made it multiple choice, don't worry. For wine 1, guess the country. And don't worry, we're not going any more intense than country this evening. But if you want to write down in your book where you really think it's from, you're welcome to. And then we move on to wine 2. So that richer, darker coloured wine, guess the grape. And then wine 2, guess the country. So I'll give you just a moment to do that. And if you do have any thoughts on the wines, pop them in the chat. David said he used a Moselle cabinet for in between red tastings. A very interesting idea, David. It's a good old trick. It gets your palate out of the funk, I think is probably the best way to describe it. Right, so I think if we've sort of had, how many have we got this evening? So if we've had maybe a third of people doing the poll, Gil, then we can let's release the answers now. I'm keen to know. We'll miss the clues. We don't need any more clues. So can we release the team answers? So what you guys have said, hopefully. And if not, fear not, because Catherine is, here we go. So the majority of you thought that wine number 1 was Pinot Gris and then followed by Pinot Blanc. So that's the thoughts on wine 1. And most of you thought it was from France, with a few from Italy. Wine number 2, guess the grape. Most of you thought Pinot Gris, with some thinking Riesling. And then wine number 2, guess the country, the majority France and some South Africa. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is, Catherine, could you pull up the presentation, please? And we will give people the geographical clues. So I've put a photo of each of the locations that these wines are grown, wine 1 and wine 2. Apologies for everyone that had to rush on the polls. I will slow down. I thought I'd get the first one out the way, get us used to it, but I promise I'll slow down for the next ones. So wine number 1, this is where it's grown. I don't know whether that gives anybody an idea of where it might be. And wine number 2, is grown here. Does that, well, anybody visited either of those regions can recognize them? I would say there is no way I would have guessed wine 1, but R. Smith has got it. Wine 2 is from Alsace, as has David. So congratulations. Yes, it's a region that's perhaps a little bit more recognizable visually. So let's talk about the 2 wines and what they are and reveal them to everybody. So wine number 1 is actually from the USA. And it is a Pinot Blanc, and this is Willamette Valley. This is in Oregon. So it's, I would never have guessed it. We've got a little picture of whereabouts this wine is produced, or a map, I should say. So obviously the biggest part of the biggest area under vine is undoubtedly California. But if you head up north of California into Oregon, there are actually a decent amount of vineyards planted. And the Willamette Valley is that valley just south of Portland. Now, interestingly, it's not a million miles off latitude of Alsace. So they have very similar long days. This is also a particularly cool area because where this wine is grown on the next slide, Elk Cove, is actually the highest point in the whole of Oregon. So it's around 750 feet. And it is essentially almost halfway between Portland and Salem on your map there. And you can see, well, you can sort of see or imagine the relief in those mountain ranges right down the spine. And so it gets really cool here, and they can produce unbelievably fresh, aromatic, gorgeous styles of wine. And actually, in terms of grape varieties, they do produce a lot of Chardonnay. They also produce a lot of Pinot Noir, but Elk Cove in particular specialize in the Alsatian grapes. So that's why it was fun to choose them. They produce Riesling, Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, all those sorts of things. And they specialize in keeping those aromatics, those lovely smells that we got. So it's hand harvested, lots of care and attention taken to the quality of the grapes. And then it's put into stainless steel vats. Now, Catherine, I think we have a nice picture of the founders as well. It was founded in the 1970s by a couple called Pat and Joe Campbell. And I think we've got photos. So here's them in 1974 planting their first ever vines. Then in the middle here, you have a lovely picture of their son, Adam, pressing grapes. That's how they were getting grape juice, by pushing them through that press. And now, all these years later, that is Adam on the right. So he joined his parents in 1995 to start making the wines at Elk Cove. Charlotte's asked, what are the giveaways of a signature Pinot Blanc? It's a good question, Charlotte, because actually it can be an incredibly neutral grape. In terms of flavour that you would expect, I would look for white peach, I would look for lemon, and that stony minerality can come through. Now, a lot of people would actually use Pinot Blanc in a sparkling wine. And the main reason for that is its high acidity. It's got a much higher acidity than the second wine, which is Pinot Gris. It's got this lovely natural freshness. So you're looking a little bit for the texture as much as anything, and that vibrancy and really, really fresh palate. Pinot Blanc is, yeah, it was actually also a very popular grape variety in Burgundy for a long time. And because of that sort of neutrality, you can find it in a lot of sparkling wines over France. So its heartland is in Alsace, but it's a very popular grape because it can take on flavors of winemaking as well. So it's a hard one to identify, don't worry. So now I will tell you a little bit about the second wine. So if you need a reminder, you can have a lovely smell of that. Oh, I should actually, Catherine, before we move on, can we pop up the website image so we can just show people the price and all that jazz and the drink dates? But from memory, I think it's £17. Yes, spot on. So there we go. £17. It's not got any oak flavour, as you know, bone dry, no sweetness there. It's got those lemony lime flavours we spoke about. And again, a bit of a waxy texture on the palate, although arguably not as much as the second wine. Drink now to 2024. Again, that's quite a hallmark of Pinot Blanc. You don't leave it forever. It definitely is a wine better drunk young. Right, so let's go on to the next image, which is our, as many of you guessed, Alsatian wine. So this is the Pinot Gris from Domaine Schlumberger, or Schlumberger, I should say. It's their 2015, and it's from a Grand Cru site called Kessler. As I mentioned, Alsace has these gorgeous long sunny days. And this as well is from the south of Alsace, so it's even slightly warmer. Where this winery is based, so I think we've got a map, or sorry, I should say where the vineyard is based, is just down here right at the bottom. I've circled it, but there's essentially a valley here, which you can just about see the road coming off it. And that actually protects the grapes. It protects them from the northerly winds. It's called the Guebwiller Valley. So excuse my pronunciation, Guebwiller Valley. And it's very, very well protected. It's a lovely warm site. They have these long summers, cool evenings, but lovely sunny autumns. And many of you may know that it's also the driest area, other than the Languedoc, producing wine in the whole of France. So even though it's up in the north, hugging the German border, it's actually incredibly dry. And that's because of that massive mountain range that you can see on the left of your screen called the Vosges. This particular wine was obviously picked late. And that's the thing that Alsace can do. They can leave the grapes on the vine and let all of these sugars build up and accumulate. And once those sugars build up, they don't necessarily have to convert them fully to alcohol. So they can leave a little bit of sugar in the wine. So that's what gives it that gorgeous touch of sugar and makes it great with Asian food, if anybody is interested. This was also picked in whole bunches, so very similar winemaking style. But the difference here as well, not only are the grapes a little sugary, and therefore there's more sugar left in the overall wine. They were also left on the lees, the dead yeast cells, for 8 months. And that gives it that texture. And often with lees, and we'll see lees in the next pairing, often with lees you can get something salty and saline, and I don't get that here. It's just added texture. Lees are the dead yeast cells. So once the fermentation has gone through, you're left with these gorgeous sort of little dead particles, and a lot of winemakers keep them in there, and they will often stir them as well. So something called batonnage. And that will make the wine often a bit richer and a bit more textured. The final picture I think we're going to pop up is just the lovely lady who makes this wine. So the Domaine Schlumberger was established in 1810. It is, I believe, the largest domain in the whole of Alsace. And this is Séverine. And we did a great event with Séverine and with our buyer, Joe Lock and W on the right. And she's an absolutely fabulous lady. And if you do have a chance to pop to Alsace, hopefully in the nearish future, then it's well worth a trip to go and see Séverine, because she's a real character and she's doing amazing things with the domain. So yes, that is pairing number 1. I'm conscious of time, but hopefully the intro at the beginning will have filled a bit of time. So we're not going to have to play too much catch up. But here you can see the Pinot Gris Grand Cru Kessler, 2015. Jo has written 6 years young, and that really is true. She said there's another 6 years to enjoy this. It's hard to believe that grape variety is the same grape, technically, that goes into Pinot Grigio. It's a slightly different clone, and it's treated unbelievably differently in the Alsace. There is no way that you could serve that and anybody would think it was a sort of Pinot Grigio from Veneto. Incredibly different. Rich, medium sweet. We've got it as a 5 on our sweetness scale here. but a great food wine. So I can't recommend it enough. And if it wasn't for you, that's okay. But if you do have an opportunity this evening, if you're eating something spicy, save that wine. Or if you're eating something rich and salty, I sometimes find that that wine goes with. I've actually got it paired with a soft cheese, but a soft salty cheese for tomorrow's cheese event. And I love that style of wine. It's almost a little bit like the Calvados experience, that really rich, dense, sweet deliciousness, but not too sweet. So I think it's time to go on to wines 3 and 4. So hopefully you're all poised and at the ready. I will start talking about them. And then if you're pouring away, then you can listen to me rabbit on and hopefully catch up. But there's not too much to say in terms of differences in the colour of these two. They are both incredibly similar. They're a lovely sort of lemony gold colour, nowhere near as golden as the Alsatian wine we just had, but not as pale either as the Willamette Valley one. In terms of the winemaking, I already mentioned at the beginning, these two are made not near identically, but incredibly similarly. So I picked them on purpose. And when we go into them, you'll see just how similar the winemaking is. But can you guess where they're from? They are the same grape varieties. There's one less thing to guess. The first one for me, so wine 3 I'm talking about now, is rich, very decadent. It's got a kind of red apple note to it. Some lemon, some white peach, and a tiny bit of that mineral saline thing. It has got some yeasty smells as well. And I mentioned earlier about those dead yeast cells, the lees, that can give a bready note to the wine. And I am definitely getting that on wine number 3. But yeah, something salty, definitely savoury, but with all those lovely orchard type fruits in there as well. The smell of the second wine, or wine number 4, I should say. Slightly sweeter for me. So here I'm getting a bit more plummy. I'm also getting a bit more sweet spice. So something perhaps slightly vanilla-y. Maybe not vanilla, that's not quite right, but certainly some sort of sweet baking spice. Yeah, I'll say vanilla, why not? It had a tiny bit of smoke for me, but that's actually come off since I've been chatting. It is still lemony, but for me, it's got almost not tinned peaches, but it's definitely got, wine 4 is a bit like burnt sugar. I like that. It's got that kind of, it is burnt and smoky, but also sweet at the same time. I think that's where I'm getting the tinned peaches from as well. It's like a tart, don't mean a tart tatin, but an upside down French patisserie with the peaches and the baking notes. Yeah, very interesting. Now, as I mentioned, they're made very similarly. Same grape, not quite the same vintage, but very similar, but from 2 very different parts of the world. And here we are going to my original plan, Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere. So have a think. I'll tell you what, let's pop the poll up now and then people can think whilst we taste the wine. You don't need to see my face the whole time. You can fill in the poll whilst we taste. But wine number 3, for me, is it's got a lovely saltiness to it that I love pairing with food. That kind of saline, bready, doughy, almost bordering on rye bread, but not quite. And then it has got these gorgeous fruits. So a little bit of yellow plum or definitely apple. And apple skin, you know, when you have a bit of apple peel and it leaves that slightly, not furry texture, but a little bit of texture rather than just the complete juiciness of an apple. It's rich. It's quite creamy, I think. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Quite a savoury wine. And then let's go on to wine number 4. Please, as I said, feel free to fill in this as I talk. But Wine number 4 for me, yeah, it's still smelling so much sweeter. I love the burnt sugar from Andrew. I think that was great. Mm. So here, again, really rich mouthfeel. It's got a gorgeous texture to it. I think flavor-wise, I find the whole thing slightly sweeter than that first wine, than wine 3, and a bit fruitier, and maybe just a bit more giving, a little bit more generous. If you're finding it less generous, I will give you a thought. Really do swirl it around. I found that this wine needed a lot of oxygen to give it its best shot and to show it in its best light. One thing about blind wine tasting as well that I would really recommend is jumping between the 2 wines. Don't just assume because you've tried the first one and tried the second, you've got calibrated. The thing I find the best trick about blind wine tasting, and when you're doing it in exams, is moving between the different wines. And you often find just by comparison, you end up with different flavors and different experiences. Yeah, so again, I now really am convinced that wine 3 is more savory. Wine 4 for me is definitely sweeter. Now I've gone back, I've reconfirmed my thoughts. Ollie's asked if wine 4 has a hint of licorice. I personally don't get licorice. Now I should say that wine tasting is subjective. So, there are no right and wrong answers. But I think also for me, it's less about licorice and it's more about that kind of confection. It's definitely got some sweets. And I think that definitely comes through. So for me, it's got, licorice root. My dad used to make me chew on licorice roots when I was younger. And at the time I absolutely hated it. And now I love it. But it does have that slightly more woody. It's not pure licorice, but it's got that kind of woody licorice. So, wife picking up aniseed. Yeah, I can get aniseed there as well. So hopefully you've seen the poll. Has anybody, I've just had David say, where's the poll? But I've seen it. I've had it on my screen. So hopefully it's come up. If you haven't managed to see the poll, then I'm just going to let you type now. Does anybody know what grape variety this is? I'll see if there's a response. Oh, poll submit isn't working. Gil, you may need to relaunch it. Apologies. So we've got David saying Chardonnay, R. Smith saying Chenin Blanc. Oh, so polls work for some people, don't worry. All you're getting from number 3 is oak. Interesting. Okay, so Gil, let's reveal what everybody thought, if that's okay. And then I'll reveal what the wines are. So the winner of the grape variety poll was Chenin, with Chardonnay coming in second. The winner for where wine number 3 is from, so the first of the pair, was France at 47%, so nearly half of you. And the wine number 4, so the second wine, South Africa at 32%. I'm not going to be cruel. I'll tell you the grape variety straight off. Some of you got it right, but not those that put Chenin Blanc. It is because it's Chardonnay. Chardonnay is the mistress of disguise. So going back to the point earlier about how can you recognize a Pinot Blanc, how can you recognize a Chardonnay is a really tough answer. And if there was one grape variety in the world that was going to be a substitute or a trickery for Chardonnay, it's Chenin. And I had hoped, I'm so evil, I'd put Chenin in there in the hope that some of you would have guessed Chenin, because there's, quite frankly, this could be a Chenin. These wines could be Chenins, really top-end Chenins. And yeah, they're Chardonnays. Based on that, some of you may change your answer. I don't know. If we pop up the screen with the pictures, Catherine, we might be able to give people some clues. Yes, Bettina, I'm sneaky. So wine number 3 is from this part of the world. So not, unless you know a part of France that I'm not aware of, not France. And wine 4 is from this part of the world. Just about to pop up now. And some of you again may recognize that part. Anybody on the chat know where wines 3 and 4 are from and can hazard a guess? No, okie dokes. I will, the big reveal then. So wine number 3 is, yes, Neil Fraser, it is South Africa, not Tasmania, not New Zealand, it is South Africa. This is a very, not unusual, but very special part of South Africa. And this is a region called the Elgin Valley. Now you can see how close it is to the sea. So you get this Cape Doctor influence, this lovely cooling, temperate sea breeze that comes into the southern part or the coastal region of South Africa. But you'll see on the next map that it's, it's alongside a lot of other wine regions. It's circled here, it's that purple section, Elgin. Now, there are parts, you could argue, Walker Bay, Hemelanard, that are closer to the sea. But the beauty of Elgin is how high it is. So it is 420 meters above sea level. You'll have to excuse me because I told you the last one in feet. My maths isn't good enough. It's 420 meters. It is this particular winery, Iona Winery, is the coolest vineyard in the whole of the Cape. So they've proven it, they've got all the data, I've seen it, and they have this incredibly cool climate. This is also hand-picked, so all of the wines we've had so far have been picked by hand. It allows the winemaker a bit more manipulation. They can decide to press with whole bunches, like they've chosen to here, which gives some extra texture, and many people think retains acidity. But you can see here, it's a cold place. I often think that picture reminds me of the Highlands. It has, incredible mists that come in from the sea that act like a cooling influence, but it's also really, really high up. It's also, as I mentioned earlier, lees stirred and lees aged. So this is left on the lees for 11 months. They keep it in barrels, so they keep it. They ferment the wine in barrel in French oak, and then they keep it for 11 months in those barrels with the lees, and they stir the lees in. So here's the wine. Oh, sorry, I lost it. For anybody interested in the oak, some people have said it was very much more oaked. It is 30% new oak, and you only get flavour from new oak, so remember that. But it's 31%, which is a pretty decent number, and it is 30% new oak, and the barrels are French Burgundy barrels, so 228 or 300 litres, and they're French. So, without further ado, I think we should probably tell you about the French version. Now, I have to be honest, when I tried these two wines, I just immediately thought the Iona Chardonnay is emulating Burgundy. They're trying to copy a Burgundian style. So I thought it would be really fun to put the two side by side, and even funnier when we look at the price. But it is amazing that they can produce a wine that is basically produced in the same way as Burgundy, but because of all the other lighter costs, labor, land, etc., they can just do it for such a fraction of the price, and they don't have the prestige. So wine number 4, this is our Burgundy. This is from Domaine Coche Bizois, or Domaine Fabien Coche, as it's now known. And they are a producer based in Meursault, and this is one of their Meursault wines. So we've got a map of Burgundy on the screen here. Obviously you can see Meursault bang in the middle. It's white wine, prime white wine territory. I think we've even got another map showing you Meursault, exactly. So this is the Côte de Beaune, middle section of Burgundy, Meursault in there, and then another map, because we love maps, showing you the exact vineyard plot within Meursault, because this is a single plot wine. It is a wine that we buy regularly. It's our most regular wine from the Coche stable. It is, funnily enough, we all thought it was quite warm, right? A lot of people said the burnt sugar thing and a bit more sweetness. Maybe I led you a bit on that, but this was actually a cool vintage. So it's 2017. But this particular spot is very warm. So it's a much, in a colder year, this is a really, really favourable Merceau because it keeps that sort of richness. And it's not OTT because it was a cold year. So it's not that sort of overly buttery, oaky, creamy style of Merceau that you can get, but it is a still very, it is still a very indulgent wine. It's got richness, it's got character, and that comes from that lovely warm site. Yes, so the site's called Lormu, and the grapes ripen much earlier there than their other Merceau sites, and it's behind the old house. So Alain, who is the now retired winemaker, it's behind his house. Now, this is where it's fun. Our last wine was aged for 11 months in 30% new French oak. This was aged for 12 months in 30% new French oak. So they have been made in terms of oak aging very, very similarly. But it's interesting that we all felt the kind of opulence of the oak perhaps a bit more in the Merceau. Because those richer fruit flavors really complemented that burnt sugar, vanilla, aniseed, all of those lovely oaky flavors. So very, very good. Now I'm going to be a bit sneaky here because I was going to get you to guess the price, but I'm not going to. This is considerably more expensive. So this is Fabien here. You'll see from the name, he has changed the name. So if you're looking for Coche Bizois, now it doesn't exist. He's changed the name to his name. He's third generation. So it's now Domaine Fabien Coche. And here he is opening some bottles. And if we just go on to the next slide, we have got the price. That's £37. So you are talking a much more expensive wine, but still in the realms of fine wine. They do produce some other higher end white Burgundies, this domain. And this is, I would never call it their entry level. What an awful way to describe such a decadent wine. But it is the wine that we buy year in, year out. It's very consistent. Toby loves it. And yes, it's a lovely, it's a great price for that level of Merceau. I would argue that the South African is an exceptional price for that level of wine, but it's much harder to sell an Elgin Chardonnay from South Africa. So there we have it. But I think both of those wines for me were real standouts when I tried to create this tasting. And I just thought really good fun to have two wines that are literally made almost identically and just have such stark differences, but at the same time, very much in keeping with the Burgundian style. And I spotted somebody earlier say that Elgin used to be more of a Chablis style than a Southern Burgundy style. And I would agree. Elgin historically has had the ability to make very, very lean, crisp, Chablis-esque wines. And they still do. They make a Sauvignon that is almost a Sancerre. You know, they can do it because they have that lovely cool climate. But I love that they're experimenting a bit and they're going a bit more Southern Burgundy, because quite frankly, Southern Burgundy prices itself out of my pocket. So I'm delighted that that I have an alternative. And if anyone wants to buy me any Southern Burgundy, feel free. But for now, I think I'm going to have to stick to the Elgin. Right, so time to move on to the reds. I'm conscious of time and I don't want to rush this last pair because it really is fun to indulge in it. So if you haven't already poured your reds, do so. I will do a quick inspection of them because colour-wise there is a difference. But as a reminder, you should be pouring or about to taste wines 5 and 6. Now, for me, immediately, you have to excuse one of my glasses, it's a bit dirty. I hate doing this on camera because it never quite works. But wine 5, for me, if you hold it against I don't have 3 hands, so I can't hold my white background up. But if you do hold your wines against a white background and your tasting mat is perfect, and sort of hold them at a 45-degree angle, what you'll see is around the rim some different colorings of the wine, and it's a much easier way to compare the colors of a wine. You can also see how deep they are by looking into the sort of depths of the bottom of them. Can you see, it's always a good test, can you see the bottom glass stem of your red wine? Now, to be fair, I can't really see it on either of them, but I certainly cannot see it on wine 6. I can see it a little more on 5. But 5 for me, so the wine in my left hand, my first wine, is a little rustier red and a little lighter around the rim. Whereas, brick red, 100% Yandeclaire. Brick red on the left, that rustier colour, and slightly more purple, although definitely not in the world of purple, but a bit more of a sort of ruby colour on the right-hand side on my wine 6. So I mentioned earlier this flight was all about challenging preconceptions. I want you initially not to try and guess these wines, because quite frankly, you probably, if you're a regular wine drinker, you will probably guess one of them. And we know Wine Society members do like a tipple, so I think the majority of you will guess one of these wines. But I don't want you to guess immediately. What I want you to do instead is analyze the wines without the guesswork. And then we'll talk about what you like and don't like about them. So I'm just going to move to my notes. Here we go. So the nose on wine 5, so the first of the pair, for me has lovely red fruits, but black fruits as well. So a little bit of both, but it's quite sort of reddy, brambly, hawthorn English countryside smell. It's quite herbaceous. So I get thyme and those lovely, basically anything I'd want to stick in a lamb, in anything in a leg of lamb is what I can smell in there. A bit of black pepper. Tobacco. It's also quite woody, and you can say that a wine's woody because quite frankly it's been in wood. We can assume it's been an oak from that smell. Yeah, wooden floor, absolutely. And I like John's comment, 5 is Ribena on steroids. I'd say it is Ribena on steroids, but with a little bit of meaty juice put in there, or a little bit of savory stuff. I've mixed Ribena in with my OXO cube because there's definitely some savory, leathery, meaty things going on there. And maybe a touch of, cigar box, great. A touch of graphite, maybe pencil shavings. It's really complex, isn't it? There's a lot going on. And for anyone who poured it at the start of the session, you've probably got even more going on. This is the wine that would have enjoyed a decant. So wine 6 will have a smell. Now, wine 6 for me is this beautiful mixture of graphite and pencil shavings, and not quite Parma violets, but really lifted, really herbaceous and minty, almost eucalyptus. I might have given you some clues there. But with that amazing real black fruit kick. For me, it's almost cassis mixed with leather and that graphite, that flinty, stony thing. And then it's, got this very, very floral, aromatic. My husband, I shouldn't say this, he doesn't like me talking about him online, but my husband, when I was trying these wines for the tasting, said that he almost got a nail varnish sensation. And it wasn't that he really got nail varnish. He couldn't actually get the words out to describe that he had a smell in his nose that was not fruit, not meat, not leather, not earth, none of those things he was expecting. He almost, and this is awful, he almost smelt albus oil when you put your head over, when you've got a cold and you need to relieve your nostrils and relieve your sinuses. And that's what he was smelling. And he just couldn't quite get the words out. And we got there in the end when we talked it over, because it's not, nail varnish is a fault in wine, and it wasn't faulty. But it has got that really, really intense nose. Alan says, first time I've heard of graphite as a smell. I hope it doesn't taste of graphite. Luckily, no. Wines that tend to smell of graphite, though, do tend to have a very lovely, where we had mineral smells in some of the white wines that were more chalky. Graphite tends to be a smell that you get that will translate more as a kind of stony, but not, it's that horrible word, mineral. But yeah, a kind of mineral smell rather than you might taste a bit of lead, but not graphite. So let's go back to wine 5. Yes, I've always been told it's like licking pebbles. It's exactly like licking pebbles. And if you choose to lick pebbles, then have a lovely time and you'll be a better wine taster. So let's go back to wine 5 and have a taste. And whilst we're either practicing licking pebbles or having a little taste of the wine, we will put our next poll up. Now, the dominant variety is what you're guessing here, because one of them is a blend, and that's again giving away far more clues than I would like. But this is not a test of your guessing work. This is about preconceptions. So the first question is the dominant variety. The second question is where is wine 5 from? And the third question is where is wine 6 from? And for anybody having a taste, let me know what you think. So wine 5 for me has got really structured tannins. My mouth is coated, particularly the roof of my mouth, and it still has some acidity to go with it, but I would suggest that I'm thinking this wine is a bit older because that acidity is maybe not as in your face as it was. And also those tannins are very evident, but they're quite smooth. So we'd call them fine grain. You're not chewing them, but they're definitely there. If anyone's ever had kind of a big Malbec where you have to chew your way through the tannins, it's definitely not that. Oh, I've just given away it's not Malbec. Silly me. That was silly, wasn't it? But yes, it's definitely got those tannins. A word that sort of more older style winemakers or wine tasters might use is muscular. Which I think is a tricky one to explain, but it's definitely got structure and it's got power. In terms of the flavour, I'm getting less fruit and more of those savoury flavours. So I'm definitely getting a bit more of the tobacco, cedar box, all those sorts of things. And that's what's staying with me on the length as well. It's less fruity and more tertiary and secondary. Wine 6, lovely stuff. So wine 6 for me has a much more upfront sort of intense flavor immediately. Really black fruited. It's almost like a savory cassis, as I mentioned earlier. The tannins are, I would say, higher. Personally, I get more mouth coating, but the fruit is plumper and richer. So actually they end up kind of balancing each other out. The flavor, I'm getting almonds in 6, Jeanne de Claire says. Interesting. I'm going to think on that one. I know, yeah, maybe. I think sometimes with almonds as well, it can be also to do with the mouth coating. If anyone's ever had an almond, had one recently, they can be really drying in the mouth. So yeah, I can understand that. But for me, it's much more of an aggressive start, but it is fruitier. And so that kind of aggressive punch in the face is balanced quite well with the fruit. I think John Wielden's just nicked some words right out of my mouth. Wine 5 for me is perhaps a little bit might need a bit more time. You could drink it now, but it is very tannic and very drying, and it doesn't have that juicy fruit that can balance the drying. Whereas wine 6, although very tannic, does have that juicy fruit and it's got that mouth water. So even though it's very tannic up front, it's very refreshing as well. So without further ado, I think it's probably time that we revealed the wines. So let's see what we went for. You're all too good for me. You are, so 62% of you thought that Cabernet Sauvignon was the dominant grape variety, and that is correct. The first wine is a blend, and it's majority Cab Sauv. So let me try and remember. I do know the answer to this. 60% Cabernet. My maths wasn't about to add up there. How many wines have I had? So 60% Cabernet, 35 Merlot. So quite a decent chunk of Merlot, but then 5% Cabernet Franc. So quite a decent chunk of Cab Franc, which does add to that greenness and that herbaceousness, which is great. So some of you picked up on that as well and thought that it might be a majority Cab Franc. Question 2, where is wine 5 from? Majority again, 63% of you said France, and that is correct. I suspected this might be the wine of the whole tasting that some of you got. It is a Bordeaux. And so for those of you who drink a fair amount of Bordeaux, hopefully you recognised it, but don't worry if you didn't, because believe me, there are plenty of other places that do produce wine like that, but it's classic Bordeaux style. And then wine 6, where is it from? Again, this was clearly the flight for you all. You must be red wine drinkers. 54% said Australia, with Chile coming in second at 17. But you are correct, those who said Australia. It is from McLaren Vale. So I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit more about these wines. And then I know we're probably going to overrun by a couple of minutes, but I will hang on for 5 minutes afterwards as well, after we finish up. So if anyone has any other questions. But wine number 5, interesting, this was fermented in a concrete barrel, which is becoming very popular in Bordeaux, or increasingly so, I should say, going back to the old traditional concrete barrel methods. And then it was aged for 18 months in French oak, of which 30 to 50% are new. So that's quite a decent chunk of new oak. One thing that new oak can do, it's sort of a bit of a mixture, but oak will soften tannins, but you can also actually get tannins imparted from the oak. So perhaps some of you are picking up some of those extra tannins. Now, we have got a map, I think, but it's basically from the crew of Santa Steph. And the Santa Steph wines tend to be more muscular. So if you're a Margaux drinker, for example, then it won't be anything like it. So Santa Steph on the left bank, famous for Cabernet, but definitely one of the more tight, tannic styles of wine here. And that's largely to do with the soils. This particular wine was grown on a gravel called Gunz, G-U-N-Z, or Gunz gravel. And it's on this beautiful, long, thin strip, which is absolutely gorgeous, right by the river. And for anyone wanting to know exactly what wine it was, there might be somebody who could guess the wine, who knows? But this is a wine produced, here we go. It's called Col Laborie. And Col Laborie is a fifth growth, and it's owned by the Audoy family. And I think we've probably got, here it is, 34 pounds a bottle. And Tim Sykes has suggested that you could drink it now till 2029. Now, I think the thing I would say is this particular producer, we obviously tasted it this year, and it's won champs this year. It's not one because it will be good in 3 years' time. It's one because it's good now. So you just have to decide what you like. And if you did find this too tannic, then you need to just slow it down a bit, put it away for a while, or open it a day before, or open it the morning of, and those tannins will soften slightly. Or the best trick, if you've still got some in your glass and you're thinking, I'm not sure what to do, have it with a piece of cheese later, or maybe even your dinner if you've got something salty, something saline, it'll soften those tannins up as well. Now, number 6, last but not least, we have got a lovely wine, in my opinion, which is from McLaren Vale, as I mentioned. This part of Australia is generally better known for Shiraz, but they are producing some stonking Cabernet Sauvignons. And the producer for this wine was D'Arenberg. And again, you may know that Chester Osborne has a fabulous winery with this gorgeous, gorgeous art gallery called the Cube. And we did have Chester on for an event in the not so long ago, last year. So he's a real character. If you've not seen him online or seen the wine tastings, then it's really worth looking into him. He's fabulous. So even though the winery was started in 1912, he took over in 1984, and he is a bit of a maverick. He foot trod this wine, so very rare that you actually do find people that are treading their grapes by foot. I've done it once in California, and I've not actually ever seen it done since. But he foot trod the wine, and then he pressed and aged. Sorry, he presses it as well in a basket press, which is mad. It's a very slow, very labor-intensive process, but it produces, he thinks, wines that have, wines that deal with the oxygen better, so they age nicely, but they're also easier to drink younger. And then he aged it in oak barriques, and again, French, and again, a mix of old and new. So they've had a really similar oak aging. This wine will age. Oh, we got McLaren Vale there, sorry. If anyone needs to know, it's just by Adelaide. And I think Freddie's put an age on this wine for, I want to say 35, there we go. Now it is younger, it's 2 years younger than the wine we had before, but considering it's a 2017 and this is already 4 years old, it really does have a long way to go. This will age really beautifully. So for anybody interested in Cabernet, it's a screw top, which is extraordinary as well. But it's a fantastic wine, and it's one of his kind of top tier, cuvées, or top what do I mean? His flagship. I think he calls them the icons, and it's called Coppermine Road, and it's one particular area in his McLaren Vale site. So that is all of the wines for this evening. I did see somebody say they preferred 6. I essentially wanted to demonstrate that it doesn't have to be the old classics that you prefer. I personally sometimes struggle with Bordeaux's that are too tannic. I don't think this is too tannic, don't get me wrong. But my palate just sometimes prefers that fruit, and it prefers that vibrance, should we say. And don't get me wrong, a really gorgeous old leathery, meaty, mushroomy Bordeaux is a thing of beauty. But I do think sometimes these younger New World wines tend to be able to give them a bit of a run for their money. And they're a great option for drinking whilst you've got your Bordeaux waiting. But yes, so I hope that you found something different or unusual about all 6 of the wines. We've got one final poll, and that is to say your favourite wine, because all of this is really semantics, and it's academic, because it's all down to preference. So regardless of price, and hopefully regardless of preconceptions and what you normally buy, I'd love to hear what your favourite wine of the evening was. If the other thing is, if it was a gorgeous sunny day, perhaps one of the first wines would have won. If we were wrapped up in winter, we might be more inclined to give wines 5 and 6. I have no qualms with you saying something today and then changing your mind tomorrow. But right here, right now, I want to know what your favourite wine was. So if we've popped it on the screen. Wine one, the Pinot Blanc from Oregon. Wine 2, the Pinot Gris from Alsace. 3, the Chardonnay from South Africa. 4, the Chardonnay from Burgundy. 5, the Bordeaux from Bordeaux. The Bordeaux blend from Bordeaux. And 6, the Cabernet Sauvignon from D'Arenberg. Now, I know that if there's 2 of you sharing a screen at the moment, there could be fights, there could be divorce. That's okay. If you disagree, just agree to disagree. It's the beauty of wine. I never agree with my other half, and it means we have to buy 2 bottles. So everybody wins. Lovely. So Gil, if you're happy to pop the results up. Oh, I'm amazed. Everything got a vote, which makes me really happy. I am thrilled that the Schlumberger Pinot Gris came out top. There can be so many so many barriers or confusion around medium sweet or medium dry wines. A lot of people are often scared to try them, but I think one thing we proved this evening is that they are rich, they are gorgeous, they are luscious, and that makes me very happy that everybody enjoyed that. I'm pleased as well that the Iona Chardonnay got some decent points, because that personally is a wine that I love and I love to drink. But as I said, I'm really, really glad that everything got a shot this evening. Now, I will stay on if anybody has a couple of questions for the last few minutes, but if you do want more information on the wines, immediately after this session, I'm going to send you out a full 3 pages that have a full breakdown, a bit of a description. So if you've been feverishly writing notes, that's great. And if you wrote notes for wines, as I often do at a tasting, I write really good notes for the first few. And then by wine 6, I've written a smiley face or a smiley face or a score out of 10. So if you have lost your way on the note taking, then fear not, because I'm going to send you all of my notes by the end of the evening. Hope you've had a lovely evening. If you need to rush off and have your dinner, fear not. If you wanted to know what I'm having for dinner, I'm having a veggie curry, and I'm going to have the remainder of my Alsace with it, because it will be amazing. But yeah, if anybody's got any questions, we're happy to stay around for a couple of minutes. And if not, if you're heading off, then cheers, and I hope you have a good evening. So cheers to those who are off. And Gil, I don't think we had too many unanswered questions in the Q&A, did we? But please do whack a question in if you want to ask one. And if not, that's all right. I've got 6 glasses of wine to finish. Lovely. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, in which case, I'm going to let you all go. Have a lovely rest of the evening. If I'm seeing any of you tomorrow for cheese, then lovely. And santé and good evening. Oh, we've had one question. I'll answer my one question. What was it about the Chenin Blanc that misled us? Oh, well, R. Smith, it's they're really similar grape varieties. There is one slight difference really in terms of structure of Chenin and Chardonnay, and that is that Chenin naturally has a bit more acidity. So the thing is, if you're growing Chardonnay in a cool climate, for example, Chablis, and Chenin Blanc in a warmer climate, let's say Mendoza or well, that's sunnier, not necessarily warmer. Stellenbosch actually is a good example. Then your Chenin from Stellenbosch is going to have less acidity than your Chablis with a cooler climate. So acidity can change, you know, depending on where it's grown. But as a rule of thumb, if it's really quite higher acid, chances are it's not Chardonnay, because Chardonnay doesn't actually have very, very high acid. The other thing is the fruits can be slightly different, but that is really slightly. And they often use Chenin and Chardonnay interchangeably in blind tasting exams because they are a little pesky pair to differentiate between. So yeah, if you the main pointer would be the acid, but the main reasons that it would have tricked you are things like apple flavors. So apple is very much a Chardonnay and a Chenin. Lemon is, peach is, sometimes white flowers are. So they share all these characteristics. And that can make it really, really confusing. The other thing is that they also share a lot of winemaking techniques. So not only can they both make sparkling because they've got similar character, but they can both be oaked really beautifully. They can take French oak, American oak, new oak, old oak. They can be lees stirred really well. They can be reductive. Both styles can be reductive. You can play with Chenin and Chardonnay really nicely, and sometimes those winemaking techniques make you think that it's one way or the other. So yeah, they're very, very similar. So that was my nasty trick, so don't worry if you fell for it. Right, thank you all very much and have a lovely evening. Thank you so much to Gil and Catherine behind the scenes, who have coped sterlingly with all the technological admin I handed them. I hope you all have a lovely evening and good night.